Hello and welcome to Mint TV. I'm Joel Rebello and we have Dinesh Unnikrishnan with me. Today we are going to talk about the impact of the government starting a new process of telecom auctions which was initiated last week, with the government setting a 14,000 crore of reserve price for telecom spectrum. We are looking at the impact it could have on banks, because banks are the sources of funds for these telecom companies. They'll have to borrow from banks, and what impact these banks will have, whether they are willing to lend to them, whether they are cautious, what is the strategy from these banks to these telecom companies. Dinesh, we know that this auction process has been controversial. It started off only last week. It's a huge amount. Banks will have to put it from their own pocket. Are they willing to lend, first of all, to these companies?
That's right, Joel. The analysts are expecting that at least by November, December, the latest round of auction will take place. And we talked to at least 7 senior officials of different banks which have majority exposure. The fact is that none of them are really willing to lend to these telecom companies to bid for the latest round of auction, simply because of the reason that their experience in the past was not so good. As we know, some 122 licenses were cancelled after the CAG detected some notional loss of 1.76 trillion in the 2008 allocation of this spectrum waves. So clearly, and banks had to take a hit. Many of those their exposure were at risk. So this time, banks have clearly said that they will go for very stricter criteria when they select the eligible borrowers. Obviously, they will look for strong financial health of promoters, a higher amount of collateral for sure, and more importantly, which they didn't last time, is the technical evaluation of the viability of these projects, which is clearly linked to the tariff rates. Because unless tariff revisions happens, none of these analysts don't expect any of these projects to come as a viable projects, and so that they can pay back to banks. So this will be something important this time. Banks they may even opt for some external agencies to do this assessment to ensure that they are financially viable, these projects. So that is one thing.
So there's no guarantee that banks will lend. And what about the telecom companies? Will all the companies bid? Because this price is higher by 7 times compared to, say, 2008.
Yeah, it's quite high. Like you rightly said, it's at least 7 times compared to the 2008 reserve price. So the sense we are getting as we talk to banks, from banks, is that they may go for only bigger players which have a very credible past record of repayment. That could mean that smaller players might not might find it difficult to secure lending funding from the banks. So banks may restrict their exposure to only those top players.
Who are these top players who could probably be?
No, you can, as we know, Bharti Airtel, Vodafone, and you have Idea. These are the companies, and but the interesting aspect one should look forward is that there were many players who lost license when after the government when they cancelled those licenses. So what will those companies do? A section of analysts believe that they may not opt for this round of auction because they have licenses till 2014. So it's not really necessary for some of those telecom companies to look for. So, but it's yet to see. We have to see how is it coming up.
So there we have it. Banks a bit cautious, given their experience. They have already lent money to these companies. It's not gone well. Profits are falling in the telecom sector. They're not making as much as of money as, say, about 5 years back. So it's a little bit of confusion with banks as well. They are a little bit cautious. They don't know which companies to lend to. We'll have to wait and watch this space. For now, it looks like banks will pick and choose players whom they want to lend to, and not all companies will receive funding for this big auction, which is due anytime later this year. Thank you. Keep watching Mint TV.